Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thank you for joining me and happy Tuesday. I hope you guys are doing well. Back at it with yet another video, and we're going to be taking a look at the up and coming ingress of Venus entering into the sign of Aries. If you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, please subscribe to the channel and click that bell button below so that way you get alerts for my other videos. Well, I'm here on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays using tarot and astrology to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Well, guys, Venus is about to make a big move. I want to break it all down for you and talk about the Venus in Aries transit. On March the 6th, we're going to be seeing Venus leave Pisces and move into the cardinal fire sign of Aries. And this is a shift from what has felt like romance, kind of dreamland, something that maybe felt a little escapist, into a more bold and direct and, well, a little intense fire sign. Now, here's what makes this ingress particularly significant. This is really what kind of interests me the most. And that's the fact that we're going to see Venus actually coming into 0 degrees, hitting that 0 degree cardinal point, the world axis point, one of the first planets to come into conjunction with this degree since mid-February's Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So at 0 degrees Aries, this carries some major weight. Likely it is tied to the themes and the effects of, well, making our dreams a reality, knowing who we are and what we stand for. We're going to talk a little bit about Aries and how Venus does in this sign and what to kind of expect throughout the transits while she's moving through Aries for the next few weeks. I will also take you guys through the 12 rising signs at the end, so stay tuned for that. Now, something that you guys should really kind of think about is that Venus is obviously the planet of love, right? She deals with values, pleasure, money, resources, anything that is going to taste good, feel good, smell good. And obviously it's about relationships. So we're going to see a lot of changes in relationships. We're going to see a lot of changes with finances as she moves into this sign. Now, Venus is traditionally associated with Taurus or Libra, and it's exalted in Pisces. So the last few weeks of having Venus in Pisces has been glorious. But now there's a bit of a record scratch moment when we see this ingress happen. And part of that is because Venus is actually in detriment when she's in this sign. So because Venus is associated with anything that's beautiful or luxurious or valuable and how we relate to other people or how we handle money, we're going to see some changes revolving around some of those themes. Now, certain planets are going to be stronger in certain signs. Obviously, we've had that exalted Venus. So you guys are going to feel the shift. And she's actually most comfortable when she's in Pisces. So when she goes into Aries and she moves into a sign where she's in detriment, it's going to feel a little bit different. Now, when a planet is in detriment, it basically really kind of means that the planet is at odds with its natural kind of nature, because Venus wants harmony and she wants beauty and she wants connection. Well, Aries is a sign that wants independence, action. It's all about the self. So when Venus is moving through Aries, there can definitely be a pretty noticeable kind of tension between what we want, right? And that's the Aries energy, and what feels good, and that's going to be the Venus energy. So for what it looks like over the next couple of weeks as we see this transit, I think that we can see some situations where people are wanting what they cannot have, and that can be physically, financially, or in relationships. We can also see a lot of restlessness that's kind of happening in relationships, and some impatience that's going on with people who we are kind of closest to the most. Now, you guys will probably notice a bit of a tendency to be a little bit more blunt, or others are being blunt in relationships, or maybe even a little bit more aggressive when it comes to matters of the heart. And we can see that there can be some difficulties with compromise. There can also be some difficulties with seeing things very clearly. And that's because we're going to see Venus making some conjunctions to some heavy hitters like Saturn and Neptune in Aries. We want to watch for acting on impulse rather than really getting in touch with our inner feelings. I think that's going to be a huge key here. But it's not all bad. Obviously, if you have a natal Venus in Aries, feel free to leave comments in the comment section below. I think that Venus moving through the sign can be very bold. It can be very passionate and obviously unapologetically direct. So some people might see a quick kind of change of situation with relationships. They connect and they meet with somebody very quickly. Some might feel a little bit more confident and have a little bit more swag when it comes to pursuing others or kind of taking the lead in relationships. As we know, Aries wants to be the first. There's just going to be a lot of raw honesty here, and it can actually be quite refreshing for those of you guys who are wanting to see some big changes when it comes to love and money. It's really not about playing games either. I feel like Venus in Aries really likes the hunt. It likes the chase in a relationship. It's about going after what it wants. So you'll see people be a little bit more direct and to the point when it comes to pursuing those things. Now, obviously, the 0 degrees Aries point is also going to be very significant, not only because of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but it's because it's at 0 degrees. So this is actually the very first start of the zodiac. It's the first degree. 0 degrees means it's a fresh new seed. It's something that's being seeded, kind of similar to a new moon. And it's the most raw, potent kind of energy when we think about a planet going through that sign. So because of this connection to the February 20th, 2026 Saturn-Neptune conjunction, obviously that was a massive transit, but that's going to reverberate into the future whenever we see planets that are going to cross the 0 degree cardinal points, be that in transit or when we see the equinoxes and the solstices. And when we think about Saturn and Neptune in conjunction just recently, now we're starting to see that Saturn's actually going to be pulling away from Neptune and it's going to break away a little bit briefly over the summer. This is really teaching us collectively that it's about dreams meeting reality, right? Saturn, Neptune forging a reality when it comes to our dreams or reality checks. It can also be us realizing that there can be some pipe dreams. And it's really about our personal boundaries because Aries represents our bodies or it represents our identities kind of being tested. So you're going to have to look at where Aries is in your chart. That's going to show you where this is kind of going down. And it can also mean that there's boundaries that are dissolving, that we're breaking down all of the walls and everything that we have kind of built up and learning through the Venus transit to open up to things only if it's safe and secure. So you'll see a lot of spiritual versus material conflict, I think, with this one. It's like, well, what are our ideals versus, what's the reality, what we can afford, how we feel, what's not working. And I think with Venus stepping into the same sign and hitting that degree, whatever was activated by the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is now being revisited through the lens of love and obviously values as well as pleasure. Now, we'll see this down the road, right? We'll see this at the beginning of Aries season when the sun conjuncts Saturn and Neptune. We'll see it eventually with Mercury and obviously in April when Mars kind of catches up. So pretty much between now and I would say the end of April, things are going to get real in the area of Aries in your chart. I think that with Venus kind of stepping into the same degree, really it means that it's adding layers of like redo energy, right? Especially with the Venus transit, where we can start fresh, where we can kind of have a clean slate, where we can also focus on our own personal values and the relationship that we have to ourselves. So many of us are going to feel like we're being kind of asked to revisit themes of that February transit, and we're doing it with kind of Venus's influence. Think back to what was going on in mid-February for you. Think back about what you were realizing during that time, maybe what was shifting in how you kind of saw the world, you saw yourself. And really, I think a lot of it's going to be about, do I really love this area of my life? Am I willing to do the hard work and the heavy lifting? Am I willing to kind of take action and go after what it is that I want? And most likely it's going to be what's going to bring you some pleasure. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the degree theory. Obviously, you guys have heard, the 0 degrees in degree theory and how that associates with like a potent start. But it can also be associated with things that are connected to fresh starts, new chapters, initiating something. So new relationships, new hobbies, new types of art, new financial kind of opportunities. And it does represent this first impulse of the sign's energy. So we know that Aries is cardinal fire, right? First sign of the zodiac ruled by Mars. So it can mean that we are willing to be a little bit more bold with our style. It can also mean that we are really taking action and being more entrepreneurial or really looking at new ways to redefine our values, potentially even taking risks in investments. So with 0 degrees kind of getting hit here, it's starting a new cycle. This is going to be a sign of new beginnings for financial markets, new beginnings for relationships. You also want to pay attention in your chart to whatever house Venus rules. So you're going to want to look at the Taurus house and you're going to want to look at the Libra house because it's going to kind of be tying in some of those themes of where this new kind of initiative is going to be coming from. And I will cover that for the 12 signs for you guys. But know that 0 degrees is very potent. Obviously, Aries does have associations like obviously war, military, anything that's connected to men, anything that's connected to quick action. It can also be about kind of pioneering opportunities and doing something that we've never done before. So when we think about the Sabian symbol, which we round up for the Sabian symbols, it's going to be 1 degree. You guys have heard me talk about the Botticelli Birth of Venus kind of image. A woman rises out of water and a seal rises to embrace her. And I think this is so beautiful, especially when we see that this is Venus that's going to be entering into the sign. And Venus is also going to be meeting with Neptune, which is very much like kind of like a Piscean energy. So I think we're going to see some big changes in style. I think we're going to see some big changes in music, some big changes in art. Certainly Venus can also represent women and really prominent women, potentially in positions of power. So think like prime ministers, vice presidents, presidents, in government. It can also be in businesses. It can also be connected to, artists, because Venus can be about artists. And some of these women kind of making headlines for being a leader in some way. But in general, the Sabian symbol is really about resurrection, right? So it's about this rebirth and kind of being rescued or embraced by something that is wild. And Aries is wild. It is quite a feral sign. This is that connection between the human and the animal kingdoms as well. So it's about kind of vulnerability meeting protection. So the woman rising out of the water represents that connection to emotion, intuition, as well as the unconscious, and is met by the seal. So it's something from the depths. This is something that is wild, but obviously it's kind of loyal to her. So I think in the context of Venus entering into Aries, this is really speaking about embracing our own power. It can also be about self-love, self-acceptance, really tapping into our own personal values and needs, and the wild part of ourselves. So I think our desires, our passions, as well as like our assertiveness will then be rising up to kind of meet us. So it can be about trusting our instincts when it comes to love and money. It can also be about being yourself, being raw, being authentic, and not being afraid to be bare or kind of, do your own thing. So whether that means that you're opting to have like a less is more kind of strategy, it can mean that you're maybe refining and kind of cutting back on cosmetics or, luxury kind of spending, or maybe you're focusing more on just kind of being a natural beauty and really embracing that side of yourself that does not have to have all of like the bells and whistles that we traditionally see when Venus is associated with like Taurus or potentially even Libra. Now, Venus is going to make a handful of aspects, and I want to kind of give you guys the cliff notes on that so you know what to kind of watch for. Equally, you guys can find this in the description below if you want to see the major transits that Venus will be making while she's in Aries. But she'll be entering into the sign of Aries on March 6, 2026, and she's going to stay until March the 30th, and then she'll be going into Taurus. Now, if you happen to be an Aries rising, a Taurus rising, or a Libra rising, this will be impacting you guys the most because you're either ruled by Venus or Venus is going to be moving through your sign. So my Aries sun, moon, and risings, you guys are being blessed, obviously, with Venus, which in this situation, I think is actually an excellent transit for you guys. We'll get into that in just a minute. But we want to take a look first at the ingress chart. So it's interesting because it's happening right around the time that we're also getting ready to see the Cazimi. But focusing more on Venus, this is when she moves into this sign. And so what I like also is that it's not quite traditional mutual reception, but we do have Mars in Pisces, and that's where, the sign that Venus is exalted. And then we have Venus that's going into Aries. So we kind of have some similar vibes here where on one hand, there's just a lot of things kind of swirling in the collective emotionally and things that deal with what's unseen, what we don't know, what's getting exposed, what's kind of wrapping up, versus how we are kind of parading or proceeding forward. And so Venus is kind of leading the march now, moving into this sign before some of the other planets kind of follow. So when Venus moves into Aries, that's when you're going to start to notice the real vibe shift. She's also definitely going to get highlighted because the day that she enters into Venus, we see that the moon is in Libra. So whatever's going on with Venus is going to be quite significant. And the moon is making an opposition to Chiron in Aries. So that can indicate that it can really start right off the bat with some relational issues in partnerships. And I think that part of what we're going to see, especially kind of the end of March going into April, as all these planets move into Aries, is that planets will eventually come in conjunction with Chiron. So it's going to be highlighting wounding connected to personal identities, where we feel kind of left out, where we feel singled out, where we feel alone, how we deal with that, how we heal that, because Chiron is direct. And where if we are not loving ourselves and showing up 100% authentically for ourselves, we can't really do that for other people, right? So I think just the opposition to the moon with Chiron, I think is going to be really highlighting that. Now, Mars is also going to be the dispositor of Venus while she's going through this sign. And traditionally, the 12th house Pisces energy is kind of seen as you know, unseen enemies, self-undoing, you know, habits. It can also be about karmic, you know, kind of situations, things that might be from past lives, past relationships, past doings in this life that are now impacting us here today. So with Mars coming into conjunction with the North Node throughout this transit, something that I've thought about a lot is like, wow, you know, there's a lot of cord cutting. There's a lot of karmic contracts that are being kind of severed. There is a lot of having to release things that can be very emotional. And it's definitely going to be impacting us physically as we see Venus kind of going through Aries. Aries has that connection to our body, right? So it represents not just our style and how we look, but it can also represent things connected to health. It can be about women's health. It can be about reproductive health, particularly for women. And I think there's going to be some kind of news that's coming up with Mars in conjunction to the North Node, where there may be some groundbreaking studies and things coming up in regards to women's health. And where women have been treated in hospitals, you know, Pisces, or been encouraged to take certain medications, that could be more Mars, or certain treatments that we are now starting to find out could have some real dire impacts on reproductive health for women. So that's something that I'm going to be kind of watching and keeping an eye out for. It can also mean that we could be our own worst enemy throughout this transit, that there could be things that we're hiding away from or hiding out from, or things that we don't want to deal with. And that Mars and Pisces energy does not want to cause rifts. It wants to keep peace, and it'll kind of hold everything inside. And so we'll start to see that if we're doing that in certain situations in our life, we're going to start to feel that we are not satisfied, or we are going to start to beat ourselves up, or there can be a tendency to be hard on ourselves because we start to kind of really hold on to all of that stuff and compartmentalize it, not deal with it, and then it can actually impact our relationship to ourselves. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Obviously, Venus hits that 0-degree point. And this is where the astrology is really unique. So not only is it hitting that degree where we saw the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on February 17th, so that's enough to make certain things kind of come back up again. But I work with a 2-degree orb. So Venus is actually within 1-degree conjunction of Neptune, and she's also within a 2-degree conjunction of Saturn. So some of the themes of just Venus hitting 0 degrees, where we hit a restart, is a little bit different. It's got a different flavor to it, because now we're actually kind of dealing with a stellium of several planets that are going to be in Aries at the first couple of degrees. My thought is that I want to break each one down and kind of talk to you guys about it. And also I have a Saturn Neptune Venus conjunction, so I can give you guys some feedback on some of my thoughts. But just looking at this, we can start to feel the effects of Saturn conjunct Neptune really, I would say, as early as the 5th of March. That's why I'm putting this video out a little bit early. We can start to see that the Venus-Neptune conjunction can also be felt, you know, really as early as, I would say, 5th, 6th of March. And then Venus is in conjunction to Saturn. So now we're dealing with several days where we're going to have Venus that's going to be making these conjunctions to outer planets and reactivating the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So my takeaway from this is that right out the gate, there's going to be some challenges with the Venus transit, okay? And so I'll break it down for you guys. Basically, I want to take you to March the 7th. That's when you're going to see the first actual big aspect that's going to be taking place. And it goes without being said, if you have any planets, I would say 0 to about 3 or 4 degrees of Aries or Aries rising, you guys are going to want to pay attention to this, because this is going to be impacting you the most. It will be in the early morning hours, it looks like. Here we go. That Venus will come into conjunction with Neptune, and that's going to be at 1 degree in about 17 minutes. Okay, so that conjunction taking place, the positive with Venus-Neptune is that romance is now meeting dreams, right? This can be about inspiration. This can be about feeling really kind of spiritually connected, some kind of divine flow of love. It could also mean that love feels very magical, or it feels very idealistic. But what you want to watch for is the rose-colored glasses. So this idealized kind of perception of something, someone, some situation. We can also see escapism in love. We can also see that, you know, the spiritual connection with a partner can be coming in, but it's not necessarily something that's clear. Neptune is foggy. It's confusing, right? It can deal with misunderstandings or getting lost in translation sometimes. It can also be about foreigners or things that are connected to foreign places. So this particular conjunction, in the positive sense, if you're using it to really divinely connect to the higher octaves of love, great. Music, water, dance, all of these things could be really great with the Venus-Neptune conjunction. However, the other side of this is that we can literally fool ourselves, right? So I think like Venus Neptune conjunctions, you know, when I've seen it in transits for clients, can manifest as going on that first date. You know, you go to show up and meet somebody and turns out they look nothing like their user photo, right? You're dating online. And maybe the photo that they use had like a filter on it, or maybe it had certain lighting, or maybe it was a photo that was from 10 years ago. And then you meet them and you're like, oh my God, I got catfish. That's very Venus Neptune. It can also be about getting duped or getting deceived into investing in something, buying something that you think it's real, and then you find out that it's fake. So you have to be careful with Venus being in her detriment here, and then also at the same time, you know, coming into conjunction with Neptune, because I could see some people making some very impulsive decisions on wanting to buy luxury items and then finding out that they're not real, or they don't quite have the value that they thought they were. I can think of dozens of stories where I've had clients that were, you know, sold jewelry, or maybe they bought a designer bag. Perhaps they bought a property only to find out that the property had water damage and it had mold all over the basement because it had been flooded, and that was not disclosed, right? So these are some of the concepts and the ideas that, you know, I kind of throw out there so you guys can get an idea of what this may mean. Once again, all being influenced by Mars. So while Mars is in Pisces, it's saying the photos, the videos, that we're watching, right, may not be real. There could be things that could be manipulated. And I have to put this out there. Aries is Martian energy. So it's going to be connected to war. So I'm kind of looking at this going like, okay, are there some things that are being falsely represented about what's going on with the current tension in Iran? Is there some kind of deal or some kind of funding or some kind of spending that's going to come out that's going to be like, well, we need money for this. This is what we're doing. When in reality, there's something else going on behind the scenes, and the money could be used for other things, right? Mars being in the 12th house. It could also be saying that it's connected to weapons deals. It could be connected to missiles. And really, this is about kind of duping or convincing the public or people to go along with this and just acknowledge or accept that this is real and this is like a good idea. The other thing that I think about is that Venus's connection to Uranus and Taurus, which is on its last kind of leg here. It's going to be going into Gemini in a few short weeks. But Uranus and Taurus has been a lot about changes going on with the stock market, with banking, things that are connected to ATMs, things that are connected to the bond market. Crypto, certainly, you know, Uranus and Taurus is very much about digital assets. So we may see some situations where quickly funds dry up, right? So something that people put a lot of value into, or they thought it was going to be, you know, tangible, or it was going to be good, they find out, oh my God, you know, now it's like dissolving or it's breaking down. We can also see some people who have invested in certain stocks or certain other things that they deemed valuable, only to find out or realize that's like, wait a second, like this has been highly, you know, overvalued. And then we see some price corrections that can take place. I also do think that it's a possibility that some people may be, you know, panic buying or selling things. I would say don't do that because you're not going to be able to catch this. I don't know exactly what's going on with your trading strategy, but I would say when in doubt, be conservative, especially the first couple of days of this transit. Really, I would say the 5th through about the 8th, because then we will see Venus come into conjunction with Saturn. All right, so Venus is now enclosed. She's like trapped between Neptune, which, you know, is confusing, and Saturn, which creates boundaries. And I do think that there's a possibility that if enough people get freaked out and worried about potentially what's going on with this lead up with war in Iran, that people could suddenly go, I need to get what I need to get now. We could see potential issues with bank runs or issues with ATMs and people getting angry because they're finding out they can't get access to their funds. So I definitely think that's a possibility. All right, so then this is going to take us to the 8th, and it's like, this is like baptism by fire. I mean, pun intended, very Saturn, Neptune kind of in Aries stuff. But then you're going to see Venus coming into conjunction with Saturn, and that's going to be on the 8th. And that'll be at 2 degrees, okay? And 2 degrees is very different than the 0. The 0 was about something that was initiated. The 1 degree conjunction between Venus and Neptune was Aries, so it definitely has to do with like impulsive actions in relationships and like where we're deceiving ourselves or deceiving others, or military stuff or war stuff. And then when it hits Saturn at a 2, Saturn is a banking degree, right? 2, Taurus, wallets. So I'm thinking digital wallets, digital exchanges. Is there going to be on and off ramps that are, you know, being shut down with banks for crypto? Is there potentially going to be some, you know, hangups with people being able to get their money on and off of exchanges? Are we going to hear about a really significant bank that's going under? I think it's possible. And whether or not, you know, this is something that's been kind of lingering in the background because Mars is back here, And it's really connected to some like bigger financial institutions that could be global. So we could hear that it could be an American bank or it could be, a European bank, but it is tied to something connected to war or conflict that's happening kind of like internationally. And I don't think it's a war that is in front of us. I think it's literally, trade wars, or it could be wars that are going on with, destabilizing currencies, things that are going on with, conflict in other countries that's leading people to not have access to their funds. So, just like as an example, what's going on in the Middle East, if you're seeing countries that are being bombed and people who are being told to stay in their homes, they're not exactly able to go out and go to the banks and take their money out. They can also see that overnight, major devaluation of their currency could be taking place, and suddenly they could think that their properties, the money that they have in the bank, everything is secure, only to have, areas that are completely like decimated. And then suddenly when the whole country is kind of like collapsing, what happens to that currency, right? So you will see some of these things that are going to start happening. And I know that a lot of people are like, yeah, whatever, give me your horoscope. But whatever is going on here is going to start impacting people everywhere. So these things start happening in parts of the world, particularly the Middle East. Oil and gas is going to go up. We're going to see probably major limitations and supply chain disruptions of being able to get certain products. There's certainly going to be some limitations in regards to getting valuable goods from overseas. We're also probably going to see that it's going to be very challenging for a lot of people to feel like they have security. Okay, so it hits that 2 degrees. Once it hits the 2 degrees on the 8th, this is where love gets real. So Saturn creates the boundary. And we know that both Venus and Saturn are debilitated in Aries because they are in opposite signs of where they are either exalted, Saturn in Libra, or they're at home, Venus in Libra. So we've got some triple action here that's kind of going on. Think back to what happened in spring of 2025. This is the first time Venus has come through Aries since we had that Venus retrograde back then. And it was almost the precursor before Saturn and Neptune went into Aries. And shortly after that is when we started seeing some of the issues with the trade wars and whether or not there was going to be deals or diplomacy in regards to trade with other countries. And I think we might see kind of something similar. Venus, Saturn, there's pros and cons to it. I think that obviously love gets real because Saturn really wants that commitment. It wants something that's secure. It wants to know that the foundation of the relationship, the investment, the purchase, whatever, is solid. It is good. And this is telling me that obviously some of us may have this materialized as a moment where there is a commitment aspect to something. Venus-Saturn transits have kind of taught me that it's like, okay, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no, right? Like that there could be a situation where if I'm really not loving the dynamic, is it that I don't love that person, or do I not love what's kind of going on? And like it made me kind of sort and sift through things and kind of go, okay, what am I willing to do for the person that I love? What am I willing to sacrifice also? Because in this case, Venus is also in conjunction to Neptune. Boundaries in relationships is very common with this. Responsibilities in love is very common with this. Feeling restricted, right? Not feeling totally satisfied or fulfilled. So this would not be a day that I would say go and buy an engagement ring, make a big investment, put a deposit on a wedding, decide that you're going to buy a luxury vehicle. Like these are not things that you guys want to be doing with this conjunction, not just because of the Venus-Neptune conjunction, but Saturn being there and both of these planets being debilitated with its ruler behind them is saying we're going to feel these strong impulses to act out and do things selfishly out of fear, right? Wanting to go after that other person even though you're in a committed relationship. Very common for people who have Venus in Aries. Wanting to, dance out and do your own thing and not really want to take on the responsibilities of other people sometimes because you want what you want and you want it now. Very much Venus in Aries. And what I've observed so far with Saturn being in Aries is that the karmic reckoning, the effects, some of the, aftermath or the consequences for doing some of these things come very quickly. So you will see that certain relationships will quickly kind of hit that turning point. That's like, okay, if this does not change, this is done. Or if we do not make X amount of money, we're closing the business, we're closing up shop. Because Saturn can also be about business and things that are kind of connected to, professional relationships. Now, when I think about this, it can bring for some people this feeling of being restricted in relationships, or that they're kind of trapped in a situation where they can't get what they want. There is no satisfaction. But it can also bring stability and lasting commitment. It can show you in certain relationships where times get tough, and if you stick by your partner, or if you're willing to work through it with them, there can actually be like a rainbow on the other side. It makes me think a lot. Like I have Venus, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus all conjunct each other in Capricorn. So it's a little different because I have Uranus there. But I can speak to the Venus, Saturn, Neptune aspect of being like, on one hand, you can give, and you give, lovingly and like selfishly because of that Saturn, Neptune aspect, Venus, Neptune aspect. But the Venus Saturn has taught me that I can do it for people who don't appreciate it, or I do it for people who can't reciprocate. And it's not because I do it because I want something back, but I realize that's part of the karma. That's like, you can give to a point, but if it doesn't feel good, or if you're actually not being recognized, or if you have somebody who's not giving you credit where credit is due, or you're constantly giving to the point of depleting yourself and you're feeling kind of isolated and alone, why do you keep doing that, right? And so I have found myself, especially through Saturn Venus transits, now I'm kind of going through Saturn squaring my Venus, so it's a lot of the same thing, that I'm like, okay, I've learned the lesson, I don't want to do it anymore, So there is one side that will make you act out and kind of go, I'm doing what's best for me. And to some extent, that's good with the Venus Saturn conjunction, especially if you're in Aries placement, Aries sun, moon, or rising, but Neptune is there as well. So don't get lost in the I'm going my own way, because that in itself could actually be part of that kind of isolating, kind of severing yourself from human connection kind of aspect. It makes me think of the, if you guys have heard the Baz Luhrmann, I think it's Baz Luhrmann and Craig Pierce. They wrote the Sunscreen song. You guys remember that in like the 2000s? It makes me think a lot of the quote from that, where they said, don't be reckless with other people's hearts, and don't put up with people who are reckless with yours. That is my catchphrase for this particular conjunction. If you're seeing it, if you're doing it, right, there is going to be pretty quick, snappy kind of karmic kind of repercussion, probably leading up to what will eventually be that full moon that we're going to be seeing in Libra, where there's going to be a lot of turning points in relationships over the next several weeks. Now, then we're going to get to March the 10th, and this is where, in theory, things are supposed to calm down, right? Because Venus is now starting to kind of move away from that Neptune-Saturn conjunction. Then we're going to see on the 10th, Venus is sextiling Pluto. So with Venus sextile Pluto, she's getting a supportive aspect from a heavy hitter, and it's happening at a 4. So this is very emotional. It deals with home. It deals with family. The Venus Saturn Neptune deals a lot with older women, older relatives, by the way. So it can mean things are going on with our mothers, our stepmoms, our older sisters, or grandmothers, things like that. And that sextile to Pluto is basically saying that now there is big transformation taking place in relationships. What you want to watch for is power dynamics, right? Intensity, or a desire to kind of penetrate deeper. It can be like a behind the scenes type of connection, and it is a friendly aspect. I do think, just in a nutshell, thinking about Aries being the individual and Aquarius being the collective, or the internet, or our friends, or our social connections, it can mean that we can't really blame anybody but ourselves if we're feeling isolated, if we're not going out there, being a part of a group, associating with individuals that are in a community, if we're not trying to be a part of the change, and we just want to blame the world for why we're in the situation that we're in and we're alone, we have to start looking at working together, connecting and collaborating, and building platforms and communities and things in the future, so we don't feel like we are the ones who are kind of taking the hit. It can also mean that we start to realize, if we want to change, we actually need to change our goals, or we have to change the type of people who we're associating with, or the people that we're actually around. So watch for that. That's definitely going to be one of the aspects to keep an eye on. And then as we get to the 18th, then we're going to see Venus square Jupiter. So when Venus comes into a square with Jupiter, Jupiter is now direct at this point in Cancer. And this is like a day where it could be almost like too much of a good thing. Obviously, Venus in Aries is going to be talking about our own personal style, our indulgence, our needs, our resources, our money. And Venus is making a closing square to Jupiter. So she's in superior angle, squaring at a 13 degrees. So a lot of it's about how we move, how we travel, how we communicate with siblings, how we communicate with relatives. And I've seen like the squares between Aries and Libra as like a lot of, what do I want to do? What do I want to do now? Where do I see myself? And how does that translate to how I want to feel? where I want to live, what I need to change in regards to my living situation, that kind of stuff. So this does represent this expansion versus kind of security tension. So what you want to watch for is overdoing it in love and in finances. Maybe being overly optimistic, or conflicts between what you want and what feels safe. Aries just definitely wants to just be a trailblazer, and it has no problem kind of going, into the unknown and doing it on its own. But I think that Jupiter in Cancer being very strong, even though it's not in the superior angle, it does mean that there's a lot of people who are like, I want independence, I want freedom. I just recently became single, or I got divorced, or, I quit my job, or I'm retiring. I can go wherever I want. But then it's going to be like, but wait, where is it going to be safe? Or what's familiar? Or do I want to leave my home? Do I want to leave my family or my hometown? So I do think that you guys need to kind of watch for overeating, overspending, overpromising, especially things in relationships. I think that could be a huge theme. And just, I think we could see some people that are also like hoarding, like especially with some of the other transits that are going on. If we do see some shortages, or if we do see some tense situations, particularly in March, which I think we're going to see globally. Are we going to see something similar to 2020 where people are going and buying all the toilet paper, or people are running around and, cleaning the shelves and not leaving enough for other people? And is there a sense of people having to reconnect with family or loved ones or others and being like, hey, can I come home? Or, can you help me? We could definitely see some of that stuff taking place. And then on the 26th, we're going to see Venus coming into conjunction with Chiron in Aries. So this is pretty significant if you have anything around that, I would say 24, 25, 26 degrees of Aries, or the cardinal signs. So I've seen this transit go one of two ways. I've seen the Venus-Chiron transit and also in clients' charts materialize as a time where they finally show up and decide that they want to open up, and start doing the healing. And whether that means a couple that decides to go to, couples therapy, maybe it's somebody who decides they finally, want to start working on healing the relationship with themselves, working with Venus things. So like Bach essences, flowers, aromatherapy, herbal therapy, all of that stuff can be kind of connected to Chiron, because he is like the wounded healer, and he's able to kind of alchemize the pain and figure out how to heal something. But I've also seen it materialize as a time where, yes, we can have relationship issues and there can be some wounds that can come up in relationships. But I have seen people go through Chiron conjunct their natal Venus, and a relationship comes in that helps them heal. It helps them like learn to love again and to trust and be open to relationships. Now in a transit, it's going to happen very quickly. So it's going to be over about a 48-hour period. But on the 26th, this is really about kind of healing love and self-worth issues. What you want to watch for is where old wounds can be surfacing that need to be healed. It's all about vulnerability in relationships, or breakthroughs in how you want to see yourself. So self-love, radical self-love, acceptance, and also doing it in a way that's about embracing who you are, right? Think about how the Sabian symbol started, embracing something. Now that would be a 26 degree for Sabian symbol, but during the actual conjunction, it's 25. So it's an Aries degree. So it really is about radical self-love and taking action in that department. The Sabian symbol would actually be for 26 of Aries. So this is a man possessed of more gifts than he can hold. So the keyword here is equipment. The symbol speaks to exceptional talent and self-confidence. The image of a man possessed of more gifts than he can hold illustrates the concept of a Renaissance man, or the man for all seasons. The challenge of this symbol is learning when and where to set limits on the demands of others, and how to avoid spreading the self too thin, or trying to handle too many things at once. There is an inclination indicated here to try to be all things to all people, and grow restless or bored when things slow down or come to a lull. There may be a tendency to overestimate how much can be handled at one time, and to overburden the self with too many responsibilities or projects. So it says, at its highest, the symbol represents extraordinary competency and talent, independence, and an insatiable desire to explore and develop all of life's potentials, all of self-potential. Watch for obsessive compulsive behavior and flights of fancy, or inability to sit quiet and alone in a room and relax. The accent on excess is on excess and abundance. The indication here is that whatever the day brings, there will be plenty of it, perhaps too much activity byword.
The opportunity, your greatest advantage lies in capitalizing on your high levels of competency. Your talents and skills should be put to their peak today. Stay focused on your own projects and goals. Guard against letting others unload their problems or responsibilities on you. Avoid overdoing or taking on more than you can handle. Learn to say no gracefully but firmly. Stepping stones are abundance, excess, prosperity, richness, fruitfulness, affluence, competence, talent, versatility, success, fortune, and blessings. Well, I think that this is just about being like, how much is too much, right? How much is too much that I have to take on? And it really depends on where it's kind of happening in your chart. But that is the last really big aspect that we're going to see. And then when we see Venus come to the end of Aries, it's going to be here. And then on the 30th, she's going to be entering into the sign of Taurus, where she's going to be moving into her home sign. So that'll be a video that we're going to be touching on later in the month. But I'm pretty sure I covered that in the March horoscope. So if you guys want to preview, you can go check that out. So basically, in layman's terms, you know, the real keys of this transit, I think, is going to be several things. Bold romance. It's also going to be about realizing that we're not waiting around for something anymore. We're going to kind of take the reins and we're going to realize what we need to do to bring more love, more abundance, more security, more pleasure into our life. And it may be as a result of recognizing what's lacking, what we don't have, what we wish we had. And really we're supposed to be in that space the first couple of days of the transit of not feeling fulfilled or not seeing what we want. So we push ourselves to actually get out of the box and go after it. Consider that the detriment energy can be a little tricky. So you will see this tension between desire and harmony. That 0 degrees Aries point is reactivating the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So there will be themes from mid-February coming back up. And there's tons of different aspects that are going to be happening throughout the transit. So there's definitely going to be quite a bit of action that's going on. Not getting any trines, not really getting any conjunctions other than the Chiron conjunction. And that one's a bit of a boo-boo. And know that this is a new cycle where Venus is really starting fresh in a new sign. How to best work with this energy? I feel like Venus in Aries, it's short-lived, right? It's only going to be for a few weeks. But to best work with it, be bold when it comes to love and values. Take into consideration what you want, what you love. Don't act so impulsively on the first leg of the transit. Take note of what's not feeling so hot and then work with it. Start that creative project that you've been putting off. I think this would be a good time to do it, especially if it's anything that deals with music, spirituality, you know, art. And be honest about what you want in relationships, what you need, because part of it is about learning to communicate and tell people what's been lacking, what's not working. Don't be evasive, you know, right? Don't be ghosty, because we can see some people that can do that with Venus conjunct Neptune. Make the first moves and embrace your desires. And I would say do it unapologetically, as long as you're not being reckless with anybody's heart. Now, for what you guys don't want to do, what you want to be mindful of is being too aggressive or too pushy. Like I said, Aries planets is, I want what I want and I want it now. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we're going to get our butts kicked with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction if we're only thinking about ourselves and not considering other people. Be mindful and know that, you know, jealousy can also be a thing. There can be some jealousy that can kind of come up with the Venus-Pluto aspects, and also with like Venus conjunct Neptune. You know, people will be less than honest in their relationships. People will be deceptive and they will hide things, or they will hide, you know, messages, or we can see stuff that's going on where there's little secret romances, or there could be some secret things going on in relationships with finances. And this is also about watching to not act impulsively when it comes to love and money matters. I could see a lot of people just shut down, like especially with Saturn conjunct Neptune. A lot of people get caught doing something they shouldn't be doing, or not being honest, or lying about, you know, their relationships or financial situations, and then they just cut people off without giving somebody closure, or without giving them the lowdown on, you know, where you were being less than honest, or where maybe you could have been a little bit more upfront. That's not allowing room for things to, you know, evolve into a relationship. Like not being able to show up and take accountability for your lack of, you know, kind of participating in the relationship and being 100%. You also don't want to ignore the need for harmony. And I think that Venus really wants that. I just personally have observed with some of the transits over the last year, with some of the Aries stuff, that as a Libra rising, it's a lot of me really testing my patience, because it's me kind of going like, yeah, I'm used to kind of just going with the flow or trying to kind of make the peace. But I've realized that there are certain people that don't want peace. There are certain people that don't know how to be nice, or they don't know how to be friendly, or how to be caring, or how to be compassionate. So you will see some people with Venus hitting Saturn and Neptune that are cold, they are distant, they will blame other people, they will not see what they're doing. There's going to be a lack of personal awareness or personal accountability. And we could just see that with Saturn being in Aries, but with Venus and Neptune being there as well, we will see that there will be certain people in relationships that are going to be left high and dry. Partners will leave them, and they will probably leave and just peace out and not really give them a lot of like feedback, because they're going to get to a point where Saturn is the line, and they're going to basically say, okay, that's the line, not doing it anymore, not working for me. So, now I'm moving forward. And they won't feel the need to continue to engage if they feel as if people are not taking accountability or recognizing that their partner is not showing up, right? So that's something that you will see. So some of you guys, especially if you're having it, maybe your first house, maybe your seventh house, maybe your fifth house, maybe the 11th house, the houses that are going to be more social or relational can definitely kind of play out that way. So let's talk a little bit about how this is going to be impacting all of the rising signs. As always, I'm a Western astrologer, so that's the kind of astrology that I like to practice. And because this is a 0-degree point, you can listen to your rising sign if you would like. Obviously, I recommend, to get the most of my predictions, listen to your rising sign first to see exactly which house Venus is going to be transiting through. Listen to your sun sign to see what's going to be kind of happening and how that impacts you overall. And your moon sign is about how it's impacting you emotionally. If you have anything in Aries, sun, moon, or rising, definitely listen to the Aries aspects, because that's going to give you keen insight, because it's obviously hitting one of your big three. And if you're a Placidus user, just look at where 0 degrees of Aries is in your chart. You may have to listen to another rising sign. Now I'm going to tell you guys which houses Venus rules in your chart. I'm going to talk about some of the themes of Saturn kind of going through there. And for everybody, it's going to be bittersweet, because you're going to see first at the beginning, it's going to get knocked with the Saturn Neptune. And then at the end, you're going to see it come into conjunction with Chiron. But that could actually be the healing phase in that area of your chart. My Aries, my Tauruses, and my Libra risings, you guys are the ones feeling this the most, as obviously it either rules you or it's going through your sign. But certainly the other cardinal signs will be feeling this as well. So Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, this transit will be either opposing you or squaring you. All right, so let's get into it. Let's take a look. Hopefully I can give you guys some insights for this transit. We're going to be starting with the first of the zodiac, obviously Aries, where Venus is transiting through your sign. Talked to a few Aries risings about this transit over the last month, just kind of getting them prepped and kind of prepared for it. Obviously, as many of you guys know, Venus is transiting into your first house, right? So this is a pretty damn good transit, because you're being blessed for several weeks of the goddess kind of moving through your sign. So if you're an Aries rising, it's going through your first house, and this is about your identity. It's about how you show up in the world. And obviously, Venus is connected to relationships. It's also connected to money and resources. So you're literally drawing in people to you. People will bring you sweets. They'll bring you fruit. They'll bring you gifts. People will walk right up to you. Obviously, it can also be really good for businesses. If you have a business, or you're doing transactions, or you're wanting to kind of connect with others. If you're single, this is a good transit as well, because it's going to be drawing people in. And the effects here, I think, are just you feeling more so beautiful and bold, and maybe more confident and ready to kind of go after what you want. And likely what you'll feel is that there's a lot more charisma, and there's a lot more kind of like magnetism that's going on with your auric field. Obviously, love and creativity will be kind of intertwined with your sense of self. And I would say with this transit, something that I think about is it's going to come into conjunction with Saturn and Neptune. So there's a lot of like maybe feeling like you're, people are coming up and approaching you, and you're like, what do they want? Why are they into me? Like, what do they want? You're kind of creeped out because somebody's kind of approaching you and they're interested in working with you, or like a romantic connection. It's also going to hit your 12th house lord, where Mars is moving through, and your 10th house lord. So it can be about some big shifts in regards to your identity when it comes to a relationship, when it comes to your career, and whether or not some of these things are satisfying for you. Now, for the tips, I would say just you'll be feeling yourself, but you may feel like you're going to come off a little strong. And I would say let others come to you, like let other people approach you. You're here just to kind of like be glowing, and watch for your confidence levels to kind of soar. I think that it can be very attractive, and people are going to be interested in kind of hearing what you have to say, especially if you have an audience or if you have a business. I predict for a lot of you guys that really it's just about self-love. It's about the relationship with yourself, about like also knowing your personal limits when it comes to either work or relationships, and maybe just really being a little bit more self-focused at the moment. I also think that this is going to be an opportunity where there could be new romance coming into your life. There could be a creative project that kind of kicks into high gear. And someone new can actually enter your life that makes you feel alive. And so your energy is very magnetic. I would just say use it wisely. Be mindful, obviously, of some of the squares that you're going to be experiencing where there's like a bit of a pivot that might be happening with your relationship with home and family, and really seeing yourself clearly. I think a lot of Aries placements right now need a lot of validation with Venus coming in. So people saying, oh, you look great, you know, you look beautiful, or oh my gosh, you're so amazing. And they need that. And there can be a tendency to be like, what do you mean? You know, or not being receptive of other people that are coming in and trying to work with you or compliment you. Be receptive of that. Good luck, Aries. I hope you guys enjoy that transit. All right, Taurus and Taurus rising, you guys are going to see Venus heading into Aries in your natal 12th house. And obviously you are ruled by Venus. So wherever Venus goes is where you are. So in your 12th house, it's kind of no man's land. It's also picking up the energy of the 6th house of health, habits, work, and routine. So Taurus, there's a ton of planets that are dancing through your 12th house, right? You're going to kind of feel this for the better part of like the next month or so. The 12th house deals with hidden things. It can deal with karma. It can deal with your bedroom. It can be about what's going on behind the scenes in foreign places, hidden places, spirituality, as well as your subconscious. I think the effects here of having Venus going through the 12th house is that romance can happen behind the scenes. It can also mean that there are some really amazing kind of like spiritual practices or retreat type work that you're contemplating doing. It can also mean that you're just taking time to heal and kind of rest. So pay attention to your dreams is one thing I would say with the 12th house getting activated. They may be very symbolic and they're very tied maybe to your love life or your relationships in some way. I would say don't hide your feelings, right? Sometimes when Venus goes through the 12th house, there's a sense of not feeling seen or not feeling like people are connecting, but you yourself may be withdrawing and kind of pulling away because the 12th house needs that rest or it needs privacy. This is also going to be, I think for a lot of you guys, about protecting your peace. And if you feel like you can't get peace, whether that's in the workspace or whether that's in relationships or what have you, there can be the sense of you being like, I just need to sleep, you know, in my own bed tonight. I need some space, or I need to go away, or I just need a weekend kind of alone in nature. And really vulnerability comes up a lot, I think, with Venus in the 12th house, and like healing in anything that deals with, you know, being afraid of being vulnerable and opening up to someone. I predict for my Taurus risings that there can be a secret attraction or like a kind of like, you know, a little flighty like love affair. But it can also be a creative project that really feeds your soul, and that there's something going on that's very soulful. And so if you're working in spiritual practice, if you're working with film or a nonprofit or anything that's about helping other people or even spending time in a foreign country, all of these things are kind of tied to this transit. Definitely focus on healing revolving around self-worth. And it is possible for some of you guys that somebody from your past can resurface, but not always physically. It can be something that's kind of coming up in a dream because the 12th house can represent ancestors or things that are connected to the past. Good luck. I hope you guys enjoy that. Certainly with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, I think a lot of Taurus and Taurus risings just kind of, quite frankly, need a vacation. They need a vacation, or they need like a break from work, or they need more sleep, because it looks like it's a lot of working behind the scenes. And I do think some of you guys actually will be traveling with this transit. All right, good luck, Taurus. All right, we've got Gemini and Gemini rising. What's up, Gemini? You're going to be experiencing Venus going through the sign of Aries, moving through your natal 11th house. Pretty friendly for you because air and fire like each other. Venus is tied to your 5th house of romance, creativity, and children. It's also directly tied to your 12th house of what's hidden, subconscious, and behind the scenes. And Venus will be dancing into the sign of Aries in your 11th house. So this is the house of parties and friends and socializing and groups, as well as your hopes and your wishes. So the effects here are quite beautiful. I think you're going to see a lot of just like social energy that's kind of buzzing when it comes to your 11th house. There could be someone in a group or a club or a network that also kind of catches your eye, and your creative voice gets amplified through a community. So a new community group, a fitness group, an online group, something that you join. Maybe it's just more focusing on your relationships with your friends. And obviously, like with Venus going through here, it's going to hit Neptune. So it could be a lot of like co-working and collaborating with a team at work. It can also be that you're taking like hot yoga or meditation classes. And Venus is going to hit Saturn. So there seems to be a theme for Gemini or Gemini risings that involves like travel and friends, like maybe traveling to meet a friend or a friend's in town to see you and willing to maybe make sacrifices and go the distance, you know, to see some people that you kind of want to spend time with. Now, I would say the key here is to not chase popularity. I think it's really about finding genuine connections while Venus is in the 11th house and really choosing quality over quantity. I predict for my Gemini risings that friends can become lovers of this transit. It can also mean that your network expands with like-minded souls. You can also find that there's a group project or a collaborative kind of creative project or endeavor that really starts to take off. So I hope you guys really enjoy this transit and it's a good one for you. All right, we've got Cancer and Cancer rising. What's up, Cancer? You're going to be seeing Venus entering into the sign of Aries, and it's going to be moving through your natal 10th house. Right off the bat, I would say what you're going to want to watch for Cancer is when Jupiter is in a square with Venus, because that's where you're going to be feeling like you're pulled between travel and work or school and work, or there's going to be some sense of just feeling like about a 2-day period where there's a lot of things that are happening at one time. But Venus rules your 4th house of home and family. It's also connected to your 11th house of friends and networks or associations. So Venus going through the 10th house is actually a really great transit. And I think it's a great preview over the next couple of weeks as we see other planets that are going to come into your 10th house where there's going to be some really big changes happening with your professional life. Now, while Venus is in the 10th house, it's touching on the topics of your career, your reputation, your public image. It means that you're really kind of turning heads professionally, and maybe your charm is kind of opening doors at work. Sure, romance can happen at work with a coworker or through some kind of professional connections, but I really feel like you guys might be having to get out of the house, being into the office more. It can also mean that you're having to kind of work with a group or working with a new company, or you're working with a friend in some capacity. And this is really about balancing work and romance, right? Or balancing home and work because it ties to your 4th house. Don't let career overshadow love with this transit, but also don't distract yourself from your goals. That's the advice that I would give you. And it's possible that there could be like a public relationship, a promotion, maybe a major boost in how you're kind of perceived. Your reputation is growing some way and like you're more attractive for it. With the conjunction to Saturn, it's interesting because Saturn rules your 7th. So it can mean that there is a new public relationship where you go public with a relationship, you take on a business partner. Maybe you're working with a therapist or a mentor or somebody who's helping you when it comes to, developing this sense of feeling confident at work and going after what you want. And it can also mean that you're contemplating or kind of dreaming about, with the Venus-Saturn-Neptune conjunction, like what your ideal job might be. And so maybe you're trying to kind of feel that out and see if there are some avenues for starting a business or joining, a new connection or kind of collaboration so you can go in a different direction professionally. The other thing I would watch for is when Venus conjuncts Chiron. I think that can mean that somebody's coming in, a friend is helping you kind of navigate some of the changes that you're going through professionally. I hope that's helpful for you, Cancer. Let me know what happens. All right, Leo and Leo rising, you guys are going to see Venus entering into the sign of Aries, fellow sister fire sign. So this is actually a friendly transit for you guys, moving through your natal 9th house. Venus rules your 3rd house of communication, siblings, neighbors, and learning. It's also directly connected to your 10th house of career and status and reputation. When Venus is in the 9th house, this is a fun transit because really you indulge in the idea, or you feel that there is some sense of luxury or wanting 9th house things. So it's like going on trips, taking courses, going to workshops, working with a female teacher. And this is a house that deals with your beliefs, your higher education, travel, as well as philosophy. So it is possible for some Leo and Leo risings that love may come through travel. So you could meet somebody at an airport, you could be going on a relationship with your partner, you could meet somebody who turns into a long distance relationship, and you're just indulging more in education and kind of like philosophical connections. I think your worldview will expand during this transit, and it's obviously making you a little bit more interesting. And I would say to navigate this transit, be open to different perspectives, different people from different places. It may actually lead to romance if you're traveling or if you're taking continuing education. I would also say don't preach. Try to listen to other people during this transit and watch for the opportunity for a foreign romance, maybe a spiritual partner that comes in, or a major perspective shift that really changes what it is that you value. Publishing and teaching opportunities can also arise, and I think some of you guys might opt to spend a little bit more money on travel. You're more willing to like upgrade your seats. You're more willing to get the nicer suite, or maybe, you know, you've been saving money to be able to go on like a more luxurious vacation or even take a course. These are definitely things that I would recommend doing, especially because you're going to see Venus hitting Saturn. So it's going to be highlighting on the relationship you have with a prominent partner. It could also mean a relationship that you have with somebody who is in the legal field, or with a maybe female mentor or teacher. That should also get highlighted. And some of this might even tie to traveling for work, or trying to get connected with education as a means for being able to kind of travel or potentially even relocate. I hope you like this one, Leo. Let me know what happens. All right, for Virgo and Virgo rising, you guys are going to see Venus going into the sign of Aries in the natal 8th house. Obviously, Venus rules your 2nd house of money in the bank, resources, and values, as well as the 9th house, which deals with education, travel, and law. Wow, Venus going into the 8th house. I mean, when any planet goes into the 8th house, there is some kind of change and transformation, right? That does happen because it's kind of Scorpio's territory. The 8th house is a house of intimacy. So it is about vulnerability. It's about sex. It's also about exchange, other people's money. Shared resources like taxes, investments, partner's income, spousal support, child support, you know, all that stuff. And it's connected to transformation. So that's the big key. So somehow your money is going to be transformed through that of another person. So the 8th house can be mergers, like getting joint bank accounts, or it can also represent, you know, something that deals with an investment or even a retirement account. But I think that really this is calling to really focus on intimacy and relationships. And so I think that for that kind of be coming up, sometimes what you see happens is like power dynamics in relationships that get highlighted. Financial matters where partners become important. For a tip, I would say don't lose yourself in someone else. This is about maintaining your boundaries, and what you share emotionally and financially needs to be really looked at under a magnifying glass, especially at the beginning of the transit. And I predict for you guys that there could be some intense connections, some financial moves in relationships, or some transformative kind of relationships that really change you in a very big way. Shared resources will increase. But I think for you guys with, you know, Saturn and Neptune being there, Saturn deals with true romance, children, or taking chances. Neptune deals with your partners or, you know, business partners or marriage. So watching Venus hit that is about you kind of getting real. And some of you guys might feel like you have to be like, hey, you know, I need to get my inheritance, you know, from family, or you're dealing with an ongoing tax issue and you want to get it solved. Could also mean for those of you guys who are going through relationship changes like separations or divorces, there is a sense of now separating assets and having to go through those assets. And likely you could see some situations where other people are kind of doing some shady stuff with joint money. So keep an eye on any accounts that can get hacked. Keep an eye on anything with like joint partner spending or credit cards. Sometimes there can be like full financial audits and investigations that can kind of happen here, where you're kind of digging deep to see, okay, you know, what went wrong, or what was spent, or where's the money going, and trying to get clarity about how to make more together. Right? That's really going to be the key here. And it's especially relationship oriented because Mars is the ruler of all of this, and it's going through the 7th. So I think it's connected to something changing with partners' money and your role or your involvement in that in the process. Let me know what happens, Virgo and Virgo rising. So that's going to be an interesting one. All right, Libra and Libra rising. You guys are going to be seeing Venus going into the sign of Aries, your opposite sign, and Venus rules your chart. So obviously wherever Venus goes is where you are. Venus also rules your 8th house of partners, money, intimacy, joint finances, and anything that deals with just vulnerability or investments. So when Venus goes into the 7th house, you know, there's a couple things that's actually working in Libra rising's favor before things get a little bit more tricky. I would say Venus loves being in the 7th house, right? Even though she does not do so well in Aries, when Venus goes into the 7th, she's kind of playing with home field advantage. So obviously you're going to want to be focused on partnerships. You're going to want to be connecting with partners. So whether you're single or you're in a relationship, automatically you're connecting with others. If you have a business, you have a business partner. If you have clients, if you have a like a marketplace or anything like that, this is opening the door to really connect you with other people. The problem here that I see is that it's picking up the energy of the 8th house. So for my Libra risings, you know, it's affecting you in relationships, romantic or business. Relationships will take center stage, and it's all about you and the other. So this is like your love house that's getting activated. So for single Libra or Libra risings, it can be a time where there's a really prominent person that can come into your life that can be really life-changing when it comes to relationships in general. The key here is not to compromise your standards just to keep the peace. And I have to really reiterate that because it is meeting with Neptune. So it can mean that there are certain relationships that you feel like aren't working, or you need to confront other people who you work with, or you're needing to talk to a partner about bad habits or scheduling or timing. You're also going to see that Venus is going to be meeting with Saturn, which rules your 4th house of home and your 5th house of children or creativity. So it could also mean that, you're going back and forth with a partner about a living situation, moving where you want to move, how you guys are going to start planning on making some changes for kids or family. And you might be feeling like you're kind of getting the shit end of the stick because Venus is going to hit Saturn and Neptune. So you're going to feel like a partner is out to lunch, not paying attention, not checked in, not there for you. Or if you're single, you're going to be like, how am I ever going to find this person? And there is this longing for relationships. Do not compromise. Remember that a lot of your partnerships need to reflect on your values. What is going not to be just best for them, but what's best for you. So if that's not being honored while Saturn and Neptune are kind of in the mix, likely you're going to be like, okay, this relationship is not working. And you're going to start recognizing and realizing that it may not actually fit into the life that you want relationship-wise. The other way of looking at this is that new partnerships can come in. Or you could see that there could be marriage proposals, there could be major relationship commitments, like finally moving in together, or committing to each other in a more serious way. And somehow a significant other becomes the center of your life. And I think that I would really watch what happens at the beginning, because it can be that, a partner is not aware of their behavior or their actions. And then as Venus is coming into conjunction with Chiron, over the several week period, they could recognize and realize what they need to be healing and changing within themselves to be a better partner. But you can also just see people who just can't, like they're ghosting, they're not showing up for you. Like as much as I hate to say that, that can happen. And you'll also see that it's going to come into a square with Jupiter. So for those of you guys who are like, no, it's not relationship oriented, it's work. A lot of it's creating boundaries with clients or with business partners or people if you just can't do it, if you don't have the time or you don't have the capacity to take on more, right? So let me know what happens, Libra. I'm sure we're going to hear some very interesting stories about the Venus-Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Maybe we'll do a war story episode on that. All right, we've got Scorpio and Scorpio rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Venus going into the sign of Aries, moving into your natal 6th house. Venus rules your 12th house of hidden places, kind of spirituality, karma, and things that are kind of secretive in nature. And it also rules your 7th house of relationships, partnerships, and allies, anything like marriage, business partners, clients, that kind of stuff. So you're seeing Venus going into the 6th house, Scorpio. So we've got a little bit of like some double trouble here, because when Venus is in the 6th house, sometimes you have to do the heavy lifting in relationships. You have to be willing to take care of others. You're gonna have to clean up after them. You're gonna have to be willing to, sometimes be of service to those in need or those you serve or your partners in some way. It could be your pets too, 6th house. And so when we look at Venus going into the 6th, really what this materializes is Venus lighting up your house of work, your office space, your health, your daily routine, and it does deal with your coworkers. So it means that there can be workplace romance, okay, or flirting with coworkers. It could also mean you go to a new gym or you go to a new place to work out and there's some kind of potential romantic connection. Health and beauty routines also kind of get an upgrade here. Maybe you're spending a little bit more time or energy on your health. Maybe you're going to med spas or you're getting a new pair of sneakers to feel incentivized to work out. And it also means that you want to look good at work, or there's some focus on sprucing up your workspace or your office space. Now, the other thing that I think about is that this is 12 houses away from your 7th. And so if you are in a committed relationship, it can mean that your partner is going through some challenges with, their sleep, issues with their health, something's going on, and you're having to be really attentive to nurturing and helping that person. Or you might have a woman at work who's going through some health issues, or maybe you're having to take care of a pet or an animal during this transit. A lot of it's about what you're willing to sacrifice to help kind of take care of other people. I would say don't let workplace drama distract you from your goals. Keep it professional until it's definitely personal. And I predict for Scorpio and Scorpio risings that there's a new workout routine, healthier habits, maybe a cute kind of coworker that catches your attention. Your daily life might get a little bit more romantic. And I do think that, with Venus hitting Saturn, a lot of it is about you showing love for your family through what you're willing to do to kind of help with home and property matters or parents. Venus hitting Neptune can also mean that you're feeling inspired to integrate, more romance and date time into your schedule so you don't feel like it's all work and no play. And it can also mean that you're just really tending to your work like it's something that you love. So try to find ways to incentivize you to want to do that. Bring some flowers into the office, maybe bring some sweet treats for people at work. Maybe it means, go get yourself, the new workout outfit or something. So you feel incentivized to actually get the show on the road with really improving something about your health and your lifestyle. Watch for the opportunity to be able to do that with relationships and partners as well. Like my husband's Scorpio rising, so I'm watching him go through these transits and I'm like, okay, we're going to the sauna, we're going to the gym, because I know these are going to be some things that are going to kind of remedy some stuff that's going on with his chart. But let me know, give me your feedback. Let me know what happens with the Venus transit. All right. For Sag and Sag rising, you guys are going to be experiencing Venus going through the sign of Aries, moving through your natal 5th house, fellow sister fire sign. So I think you guys are going to dig this transit. It's a nice one. Probably the one thing you're going to want to watch out for is that Venus will square Jupiter. And that can be a time where it's just too much of a good thing, too much fun, too much partying, too much dating. It could be also just feeling like, Ace of Cups energy, kind of cup runneth over. It's just like a lot of big emotions and a lot of big feelings and a lot of change, especially when it deals with creative projects, romance, and children. All right, Sag, so you're going to be seeing Venus going into your 5th house. Probably one of my favorite places to see Venus transit. The 5th house is a house of creativity. It's about romance. This is about children and just honestly having fun, playtime. So because Venus is tied to your natal 11th house of friends, goals, and allies, and your 6th house of health and routine, it almost looks like you're trying to bring a little bit more social time into your life. You're trying to get involved with hobbies where you can do this with groups of people. And it can also involve something that deals with your coworkers. It can be about a creative project. It could be something that you're getting ready to launch. And it can also be something that's kind of connected to health as well. Now, when you go through the transit, I predict for a lot of you guys that there's going to be creative projects that could just really explode, and there could be a lot of passion. Romance is exciting, it's bold, it's playful, and I kind of feel like you're like the life of the party with this Venus in the 5th. I would say just don't play hard to get with Venus in this house. Like let other people see your light and see your creativity and also your heart. And you'll take your playful energy and you'll put it into like taking chances and risks, whether that's in love or whether that's investments. I think that people are going to see that energy is very youthful and very attractive. And it's very likely, I predict a lot of you guys are just going to have the potential for a lot of passion in your love life. A creative project can take off, or someone special who kind of makes your life more fun can enter into your world. Now, the reality is that Venus has to pass Saturn and Neptune. So Saturn's going to deal with money, so what you're investing into your children, creative projects or hobbies. It also could be picking up the energy of like something new you're writing, things connected to apps or applications or websites. And Neptune can mean something that's connected to your home and your family. So you're trying to find a way to maybe start a new creative business, or maybe you're getting ready to put out a new app, or potentially, it's creative writing, or you're feeling inspired in some way romantically, and you just start kind of throwing something together that's like on your mind. Be mindful that if you have children, certainly relationships with children can get a little tested here. It can also indicate that this is a time where children could be a big topic. So it could be, talking about having kids, or what you do with kids, or how that would impact or kind of change your home or kind of your living circumstances as well. Okay, have fun with that. I think you guys are gonna like this transit for the most part. All right, we've got my Capricorns and Capricorn risings. I would say for the next 3 signs, even though it's not happening in your chart, you're going to see conjunctions to your ruler. So Capricorn and Aquarius are ruled by Saturn. Obviously, Pisces' modern day ruler is Neptune. So you guys are being visited by a benefic, so it could actually be quite positive. Now, for my Capricorn risings, you're going to be seeing Venus entering into the sign of Aries, and that'll be in your natal 4th house. Venus rules your career, your public standing, and your reputation. She's also connected to your 5th house of creativity, dating, and children. usually when Venus goes into the fourth, there's a woman coming to visit you. You know, it could be a female friend, could be a family member. It could also mean that you're potentially contemplating moving for work, or you're spending a lot more time with like a grandmother or like a mother figure. And also really focusing on fourth house matters. So home, property, family is usually like the main focus. Obviously the fourth house is also your emotional foundation and your roots. So what you'll feel is that when Venus goes into the fourth house, you know, you're going to see some family dynamics that are going to shift pretty dramatically. Your home life can get a lot more romantic or creative, and where you live is going to matter a lot more to you now. This is really about balancing family obligations, you know, with your career or your own desires, and not letting family pressure kind of dictate your choices of where you live, how you live, you know, what's going on in your relationships or even your lifestyle. And I'm predicting that it is possible that you're looking for a place to call home, or you're contemplating, you know, revamping your home, renovating, getting new furniture, bringing in art, creating a creative space to kind of have at home. And I think that this is wonderful because regardless of what's changing with home, there is this deepening of family bonds that will happen. It's possible that someone special kind of meets your family and all things go well. And because Venus rules your career and status, and it's also about children, it can mean that you're entering into a new phase of your life where you might be, you know, having kids, getting married, buying a house, that kind of stuff, or your children are going through that if you're older. Venus will be meeting with Neptune, so it can also be highlighting a family relationship dilemmas kind of coming up, particularly with like siblings, cousins, or even like neighbors. And then Venus is going to hit you. So this is about you maybe being able to work from home, or you're committing more to staying home and taking care of family. Speaking from somebody who has this conjunction in my fourth house, it's interesting. Like I work from home, I have a creative spiritual business. Obviously, you guys are watching my content. But I have like really kind of eccentric like taste. I like things that are very old. I like antiques. I like stuff that is very like Victorian looking, and stuff that's a little bit older and a little bit more refined. You know, my Saturn transit in the fourth house, you know, I went back home and visited my grandmother, you know, in my hometown, right when Saturn was coming into conjunction with my fourth house with my Venus. And so, you know, that was the time I was feeling like very dissatisfied with where I was living. But that period I look back on and I was like, that was such an amazing time to be able to spend time with my grandmother. And so take note of the older women in the family in your lives, and also some of the bigger emotional changes that you're kind of making during this time. And I hope all goes well with some of the changes. Honestly, Venus hitting Saturn is quite positive for you guys. So you might be making some really big kind of foundational changes that are going to be playing out for the next couple of weeks. Good luck. For Aquarius and Aquarius rising, you guys are going to see Venus entering into the sign of Aries. It's going to move through your natal third house, and Venus rules higher education, travel, legal matters, and publishing. She's also connected to your fourth house of home, family, and your emotional foundation. As Venus goes through the third house, this is a house that deals with learning, things like websites, blogs, your siblings, your neighbors, your community, as well as your vehicle. So Venus coming in and hitting Saturn off the bat, I think is positive, because actually Aquarius risings have two great transits. Venus hitting Saturn, so it can mean that you're communicating with family or a relationship at a distance, maybe planning a trip, maybe writing a book. And Venus will also sextile Pluto in Aquarius. So if you're an early degree Aquarius or Aquarius rising, this is a pretty nice transit for you guys. I do think that, you know, Venus moving through this house, what you're going to see is it's really lighting up pretty words, kind communication, thank you notes, you know, that kind of stuff. And communication in daily exchanges. Maybe you're feeling like a little flirtier. It can also mean that just in how you're communicating, how you're sharing, you know, you're trying to really use your words in a magnetic way. But I would caution you, because you're going to see Venus hitting Neptune and Saturn when it comes to signing contracts, particularly financial. If you're buying cars, if you're planning travel, because the first couple days of this transit, things aren't really so clear. So really read the fine print, or maybe wait until Venus starts to kind of come into sextile with Pluto before you make any of these big decisions. Think before you speak. Words can be very powerful for you right now, and it can be something that makes or breaks certain relationships with other people. Don't say things that you will regret. And I would say, I predict for a lot of you guys that you're going to just be feeling a little bit more willing to engage with other people and communicate with other people. And like a chance conversation with somebody at a coffee shop can lead to a new friend or a new relationship. This is also maybe about like a sibling and a sibling relationship that gets highlighted for you guys, or your communication skills maybe being a little bit more attractive. But I really think a lot of you guys are going to be thinking about buying a car, planning a trip, or buying a gadget. And I would say wait until you start to see Venus come out of conjunction with Neptune and Saturn. Trust me on this. Give it until closer to like the 9th, 10th, and 11th for some of that conjunction to clear, because there's a lot of miscommunication going on with Mars, the dispositor, being kind of wrapped up in this Mercury retrograde. So there's a lot of like misunderstandings or miscommunication about money or values. But for the most part, I think after that, if you do want to plan short distance trips, or if you are wanting to have a heart to heart with like a sibling, or maybe even look at getting a new car, certainly in the weeks ahead, that's very possible for you guys to do. And I hope you enjoy that. And I hope you guys are making some phone calls and sending some thank you letters to people and just reconnecting with your words. All right, Pisces and Pisces risings, you guys are going to be seeing Venus going into the sign of Aries in your natal second house. Venus rules the 3rd house of communication, learning, and siblings or vehicles. She's also connected to the 8th house of other people's money, investments, inheritances, taxes, and kind of karmic entanglements in relationships. So obviously, this transit of Venus going into the 2nd house, it is nice because Venus likes to be in the 2nd house. It's about money, resources, and values. Also, Venus is going to be hitting Neptune, which is your modern day ruler. So it's like a double dose of bringing something into you, but I think it's more action based. I think it's more about you going, I know my values, I know my worth. And that's because the 2nd house deals with these things. It's not just money in the bank. It's also going to be about your possessions and how you feel about yourself. Now, when you see this transit happen, you will see that your relationship with money and self-worth will shift. And first, it's going to take a knock. So that knock will stem from the fact that Saturn is going to come into conjunction with Venus, and Neptune's going to come into conjunction with Venus. So there's a lot of like, I want to make this thing. I want to build this thing. I want to do this thing. But there may be the sense of doubting yourself, or money can feel a little tight, or you can be afraid to take a risk or make a change. Once Venus starts coming out of that conjunction with Saturn and Neptune, things are going to ease up a little bit. You are going to see that it will also come into a square with Jupiter at some point. So it can mean that there's a lot of having to push yourself to invest, and whether that's time, emotions, energy, but in this case, it's action when it comes to creativity, self-employment, children, anything that deals with having fun. So you have to believe that you are capable of being able to bring some of these things to light that you love and enjoy. And yes, it's going to cost money to do some of this stuff. So whether you're taking a class, launching a business, or traveling, you're going to have to kind of put your money where your mouth is. But your relationship with money will shift. And you will see that anyway with Saturn being in your 2nd house. But I think it's because you're learning to value yourself more, and other people are going to notice that. I would say, 2nd house transits has always taught me that you're only going to be worth as much as you think you are, right? So you're only going to be paid as much as you think that you're worth, or as much as you deserve. So a lot of this is like a testing grounds to kind of realize like, hey, I could be charging more. I should be looking for a better paying job. I do need to really kind of value myself. I can't let other people kind of get me down. And I think that you're really going to be seeing that when you have that shift, other people are going to respond to that. So don't overspend to impress. Authenticity is more attractive, I think, than material things right now with Saturn and Neptune in your 2nd house. You don't need all the bells and whistles and other things to kind of convince people that you're good enough. You will see some financial opportunities, likely when Saturn and Venus start to separate, and probably a value shift, or somebody who values who you are, not necessarily what you have. So let me know what happens. That's going to be an interesting transit, especially for like the last 3 signs, because you guys are kind of getting the sweeter side of the transit with the conjunction. All right, guys. Well, I hope that was helpful. Obviously, at this point in time, we know that Venus in Aries is a bit fiery. It's a bit passionate, and sometimes an unfavorable transit. But this one's going to be a little bit more karmically influenced than usual. Think of it like with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, whatever is not meant to be is going to be removed. So if something is quickly or swiftly being removed, it's part of Saturn's kind of karmic lesson. I think that you're being invited to go after what you want with more confidence and a much more kind of bold demeanor. Plus, with Venus crossing that 0 degrees Aries point, that same Saturn-Neptune conjunction, there is this layer of kind of revisiting the themes from what has happened over the last few weeks. So this is all of our chance to kind of start fresh when it comes to love, values, and creativity. I hope you guys work with this energy while it's here. Definitely leave me your comments and your feedback below. And if you resonate with this video, give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing and sharing my video to other Astro friends. While you guys are on socials, follow me on X at BTV Astro for more of my Astro ramblings. And until next time, stay tuned. We'll see you guys soon on Thursday. We're going to talk all things Cazimi and enjoy the Venus in Aries transit. Take care.